Chapter 1363. After figuring out this point, everyone's expression became much better. Everyone had a deeper understanding of Yang Chendong's strategy. Garcia was probably still secretly happy at this moment, but if he knew that what he got was what Yang Xia wanted to give him, and that he had successfully misled them, it would be too late for him to cry. Immediately secretly arrest Anthony and learn more about the situation on the other side of Spain from his mouth. At the same time, arrange for people to learn the Western language, so that it will be easier to manage them in the future. Yang Chendong saw that the matter was settled, so he made a final conclusion. After saying this, he looked at Director Che Chao of the Security Bureau and nodded approvingly. This time, the Security Bureau reacted very quickly, which is worthy of praise. I will record this merit. I also hope that you can continue to work hard and find more problems hidden in the dark. Che Chao, who was praised, was very excited. He immediately stood at attention and gave a standard military salute. Please rest assured, 6th young master, our Security Bureau will work hard and strive for new achievements. The matter of the Spanish merchants was over. Not long after, Anthony was arrested. After the Security Bureau used certain means, he lowered his noble head and was willing to tell everything he knew. Not only that, the Security Bureau, with the help of the Navy, began to secretly arrest some other foreign sea merchants who came to Resin City. From their mouths, more and more navigation maps fell into the hands of the Navy headquarters, making full preparations for the battle at sea in March. Yang Chendong was still constantly monitoring and guiding the work of Resin City, guiding Yang Xia's development with some of the vision and ideas of the future generation. At night, he was busy in the palace. Now he only has a son and a daughter. In the future, the huge family business will obviously not be enough for them, so he needs to work harder. Fortunately, Yang Chendong has the strength of a grandmaster. Even if he works hard, it won't hurt the foundation of his body. In addition, his wives are very cooperative, so it's only a matter of time before results are produced. On the grassland battlefield, although Yang Chendong was no longer there, the troops left there were still seriously carrying out the strategy of besieging the city. The results were also very obvious. If it wasn't for the arrival of winter and the heavy snow, the entire Ili Inner District would have been under Yang Xia's control. Southern Ming Dynasty, Department of Aristocrats. Zhu Huichun's expression was a little unsightly. Zhu Huitu, who betrayed his elder brother and younger brother and became the king of 3 provinces from King Guangdong, finally realized that he had been fooled by Zhu Qizhen after more than 2 years. What does it mean to be in charge of military affairs but not political affairs? At first, Zhu Huichun thought that as long as he had military power, he could do whatever he wanted. But who would have thought that raising an army would require money, especially when he had 500,000 soldiers? Every month, even every day, his expenses would be enormous. If he hadn't reached an agreement with Yang Chendong, where he would give 200,000 Han people every year in exchange for the exclusive distribution rights of Yang Xia's products in the 3 provinces, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. But even so, he still needed to supplement a lot of money from his own treasury. After more than 2 years, he felt that he couldn't hold on any longer. Zhu Huichun gnashed his teeth in hatred and called his most trusted civil official Chen Tian to discuss how to solve the problem. Increase the amount of trade with the 5-star army. We will provide 400,000 Han people every year, but the goods they provide must also be doubled. After discussing for a while, Chen Tian finally came up with an idea. Good. Zhu Huichun nodded heavily. I'll leave this matter to you. But this still can't solve the fundamental problem. Zhu Qizhen wants to make things difficult for me? Then I won't let him have it easy. Order people to pressure Shiping Wang Mubin and ask them for food. Secretly send people to contact the Bengal army and make them act as if they are pressuring us. I don't believe that old man will dare to disobey. Pressure Mubin. With his strong military power, he could naturally force him to submit. Squeezing some food or even gold and silver was not a problem. But this would naturally cause Emperor Yingzong to be dissatisfied. If it wasn't necessary, Zhu Huichen wouldn't want to do this. But now, he had no better ideas. Even if it made the emperor unhappy, he had to try it. After Chen Tian heard this, his face showed some hesitation. He wanted to say something to dissuade him, but he thought that there was no other way. Angering the emperor was better than not being able to live. He could only nod and agree. The moment Zhu Huiqiang made a move, the relevant telegram was immediately sent to the palace of Tsuxian City. After reading the telegram, Yang Chendong was displeased. Does this Zhu Huiqiang only know how to contact foreigners to bully the Han people? Beta Persei, who had followed Yang Chendong for many years, immediately understood the meaning of his words. He immediately said, "Young master, don't worry. I will immediately arrange for people to warn the king of the 3 provinces. Yes, we have to warn him. You can tell him clearly that there is no problem with doubling the population and doubling the goods. However, if he dares to join forces with other countries to bully the Han people, there is no need for the southern Ming Empire to make a move. My 5-star army will be the first to destroy him." If he had to say who he hated more between foreign enemies and traitors, it would definitely be the latter. Towards those who had no ancestors and no sense of nationality, once he made a move, he would not be lenient. A telegram was an order. Very quickly, Yang Xie's envoy received the order and went to meet the king of the 3 provinces on the same day. No one knew how the discussion went, but in short, the Bengal army quickly retreated from the border of the southern Ming, allowing the people there to have a chance to breathe. The 5-star army had already agreed to double the population and goods. Shiping's King Mubin could not stand the pressure of Zhu Huichen's army and gave out some food and money. On the surface, it seemed that Zhu Huichen's danger of raising an army was temporarily resolved. However, he was not happy at all. It was not for any other reason, but because the attitude of the emissary sent by Yang Chendong was very bad and very threatening. What kind of person was Zhu Huichen? For glory, wealth, and power, he was even willing to send his own brothers to the guillotine and was willing to betray them. How could such a person be willing to be threatened by others? Therefore, even though he agreed to Yang Chendong's request to not let foreign countries oppress the Han people, in fact, he had already done so. However, after the envoy left, he smashed a few sets of porcelain bowls, one of which was expensive, his favorite tea set. He's going too far, he's going too far. We're all kings, why did he do this, why did he do this? Zhu Huichen was so angry that he cursed in the main hall. The maids and servants at the side did not dare to breathe too loudly. After smashing the bowls, his anger finally subsided. Then, Zhu Huichen dove into his bedroom and went to sleep. He slept until the sky turned dark and only woke up. After shouting for someone, the person who appeared in front of him was actually Chen Tian. Looking at his most trusted think tank, Zhu Huichen finally didn't show his displeasure. Instead, he gave a wry smile and said, "Why are you here, sir? Did some reckless servant go to invite you? Alas, these people are really ignorant." "No, no." Chen Tian hurriedly waved his hand. Although when Zhu Huichen was angry in the past, the servants had no choice but to invite him twice, this time he was not invited, but uninvited. "Your Majesty, there is a very confidential matter to discuss with you." After a quarter of an hour, a neatly dressed Zhu Huichen appeared in the secret room. Opposite the candlelight was a very ordinary-looking man of about 30 years old. If he were to be thrown into the streets, no one would be able to recognize him the moment he turned his head. However, when such a person saw Zhu Huichen, he did not show the slightest bit of nervousness. Just this boldness alone was enough to prove that he was not an ordinary person. "Who are you?" Zhu Huichen was displeased. If this person had not been introduced by Chen Tian, he was afraid that he would have been angry and punished. "This humble one greets your highness, the 3rd province king." The person was not angry or panicked. He first bowed and then opened his right hand, handing over a banknote worth 10,000 taels with both hands. Although a banknote worth 10,000 taels was not much, at least it made Zhu Huichen's expression look a little better. Of course, it was only 10,000 taels of silver. It was not worth it for Zhu Huichen to reach out and accept it. He just looked at the person curiously. One should not accept a reward without doing anything. Before he knew the purpose of this person's visit, he would not casually accept the money. The newcomer seemed to have thought of this long ago. He just grinned and revealed a simple and honest smile. If it wasn't for his previous calm and composed performance, he would have given off the impression that he was an honest farmer. This humble one is Mo Gui. I am here to clear your doubts. Mo Gui? Clear my doubts? What doubts does this prince have? Zhu Huitu chuckled, and there was a hint of horror in his laughter. Mo Gui, who was not affected by Zhu Huichen's laughter, spoke up. Your Highness, you have great ambitions. It is a pity that He Shengdong and Bugnam of Gojoseon's appearance overshadowed your glory. If you want to achieve great things, you have to get rid of Yang Xie first. Now there is an opportunity in front of you. I wonder if you are willing to seize it. Zhu Huichen naturally knew what He Shengdong meant. He had just been warned by Yang Chendong and was furious. Mo Gui had appeared. He had to admit that he had chosen the right time. But did he really think he was stupid? Before he could figure out the other party's background, he would not say anything that was on his mind or speak the truth. Zhu Huichen just laughed and did not make any comments. Mo Gui still did not care about this. Instead, he put the banknote worth 10,000 taels of silver on the table and said, if there is an opportunity to get rid of Bugnam of Gojoseon, would you be willing to do it? Of course, before that, you don't need to do anything. If Bugnam of Gojoseon is really in trouble one day, you only need to move your fingers and hit him when he is down. Your Highness does not need to answer this humble one's question. If there is an opportunity, you can decide whether to do it or not. If there is no opportunity, you can just bide your time. This 10,000 taels of silver is my master's sincerity. At least it shows that I am not a person who likes to talk nonsense. Okay, if there is an opportunity, we will meet again. Chapter 1364. Before Zhu Huichen could give an explanation, Mo Gui had already turned and walked out of the secret room. Zhu Huiyun didn't stop him. Why would he stop him? He didn't do anything and gave him 10,000 taels of silver. Even if he was crazy, Zhu Huiyun still liked him. If he could meet dozens of crazy people like him in a day, would he stop? Of course, Zhu Huiyun didn't think Mo Gui was crazy. Since he said so, something might happen. What he needed to think now was what to do when the opportunity presented itself. Chen Tian brought him here, so Zhu Huiyun naturally wanted to hear his thoughts. Minister Chen, what do you think? Your Highness, let's just pretend that nothing happened and do what we should do after receiving the banknotes. If it really is as this person said and such a day really comes, it won't be too late for us to plan for the long term. Otherwise, let's pretend we didn't see him. It's not a bad thing to take the money for free. No one would complain about having too much money. Although 10,000 taels of silver wasn't much of a problem for Zhu Huiyun, who had 500,000 soldiers, it was free. But after all, he had gotten it for free. Who would complain that it was too little? Zhu Huiyun nodded silently, obviously approving of this decision. But in fact, he was very curious. This Mo Gui was obviously just a messenger. He had a master behind him. Who was this master? If he guessed correctly, the person behind Mo Gui must know him and Yang Chendong very well. How could it be a coincidence that Mo Gui made a move right after Mo Gui threatened him? Interesting, interesting. Thinking that there was someone who knew Yang Chendong so well and was secretly watching everything, Zhu Huiyun suddenly became interested. He even began to look forward to that moment. If that day really came, he would definitely make a move. He had long coveted Yangxia. Thinking of the countless good things in Yangxia's territory, once Yang Chendong was in trouble, Yangxia would be like the sky falling. It would definitely be chaotic. When that time came, he would definitely make a move. Countless riches would be waving at him. That day would be his chance to achieve great things. Far Eastern Province. After entering winter, it snowed for 3 days. The thickness of the snow at the highest point was 60 centimeters. This was just the beginning of winter. It could be imagined that there would be more snow like this in the future. Tang Sheng of the 4th Cavalry Division walked out of the tent. When he saw the white snow in front of him, his expression became nervous. He began to worry about whether his tribe had suffered a disaster, whether there were casualties, and whether they had enough food. Tang Sheng wasn't a pure Han. His mother was Han, and his father was Mongol. Back then, the Mongol cavalry raided the fields to raid his mother and gave birth to him. His poor mother died of an illness not long after giving birth to him, leaving only his father and grandfather to depend on each other for survival. When he was a teenager, his father died in a battle over a good piece of pasture between tribes. So he left his hometown with his grandfather and the tribe and came to Siberia. Tang Sheng was good at fighting. In the end, he was noticed by Chen Bo during a battle against the 5-star army and was promoted to the position of division commander. However, it was a pity that the Far Eastern region was based on the Han people. The clans that had killed countless Han people had a grudge against the Far Eastern region. Commander Chen Bo didn't have a good impression of such people. Plus, the space in the city was limited, so it couldn't accommodate so many people. No matter how Tang Sheng tried to persuade him, he wouldn't let them in. Helplessly, he had no choice but to use his authority to find a place for them to stay in between the Far Eastern Prefecture and the West Siberian Prefecture. From time to time, he would send people to greet them and bring some food and other necessities. With the snow, the roads were blocked, and Tang Sheng began to worry. However, he had a duty and could not move without a military order. In addition, the snow had blocked the road. Even if he sent out his trusted aides, they would not be able to get results immediately. This made him feel uneasy, as if ants were crawling in his heart. Give the order to clear the snow and check the situation. If the people are in trouble, open the granaries and release food. Tang Sheng gave the order to a messenger behind him. At this moment, Tang Sheng was displaying the authority of a division commander. After 5 days, the snow was cleared and a batch of food was released, so the people around the 4th Cavalry Division didn't have to worry about food. However, as a division commander, Tang Sheng's face was still filled with worry. The people of the Far Eastern Province had the help of the Yuan Province army, so normal disasters couldn't do anything to them. But what about his tribe? Would they be able to pull through? On the 6th day, a tribesman whom Tang Sheng had been looking forward to suddenly appeared outside the big tent. Tang Sheng was excited, but at the same time, his face darkened. This was because he realized that the tribesman named Herrick had tears streaming down his face when he saw him. "Brother Tang, our tribe has been surrounded by Akmu. You have to save them." The winter in Crimson City was no different from usual. In this half-modern city, there were all kinds of strategies to deal with anything. Even if there was a tsunami, there were ways to deal with it. Not to mention, there was very little snow in Crimson City in winter, and most of the time, there was no snow. It was already January 1461. Under Yang Chendong's constant efforts, the 6th Madame Wan Xiaoyu was pregnant. And this was only the beginning. In January, they found out that the 3rd Madame Xiao Yuxue and the 4th Madame Dong Xiangxiang were pregnant. The Yang family's children were a great thing for the Yangxia people, so everyone's face was filled with joy. As the leader of the Yangxia people, Yang Chendong was naturally in a good mood. At night, he was busy with the concubines, and during the day, he walked around the factories and schools, leaving traces of him everywhere. At the munitions factory's steel mill. The factory manager, Wu Gang, was showing Yang Chendong the cavalry sabers and war sabers made of fine steel. Wu Gang was a veteran of the Xianxia people. He started working with Yang Chendong in June 1448. After more than 10 years, his steel mill was constantly improving. In the past, he had produced some weapons that could cut iron like mud, but they were not used in the army. At that time, the Yangxia lacked iron ore, and everything had to be cleared for the production of firearms, so the weapons in the hands of the 5-star army soldiers were not bad, but they were far from the best. The Yangxia expanded, occupied a lot of places, and had more iron ore, so improving the quality of cold weapons became one of the important jobs of the steel mill. When Yang Chendong saw that the cavalry saber in Wu Gang's hand could easily cut ordinary swords, his face showed satisfaction and excitement. With such weapons, there would be fewer soldiers dying in the war in the future. The main cement factory. The factory manager, Jing Guang, led Yang Chendong to inspect the 36 workshops in the factory. Among them, 6 workshops and production lines were newly installed. With their efforts, the daily output of cement could reach 500 tons, but it was still not enough for the rapid development of the Yangxia. Manager Jing, we need to continue to expand the production lines. There will be many places that need cement in the future. Don't be afraid that no one will want it. I can tell you that even if your factory produces cement for 100 years, it will still be far from meeting the demand. If you need any help, you can apply to the Ministry of Finance. Yang Chendong knew the use of cement, whether it was building houses or building roads, it was indispensable. Now it could be digested as much as possible. Jing Guang certainly knew the newly established Ministry of Finance, which was established by Yang Chendong to reduce the pressure of Governor Yu Qian. Its role was basically the same as the so-called Ministry of Revenue. The first minister was Yuan Shaochen, who was transferred from Yunnan province. 6th young master, don't worry. I will go back and apply for more cement. Jing Guang promised. Not only do you have to make more, but the quality must also be guaranteed. The label must be up to standard, and it must be checked layer by layer. If it is not up to standard, it will not be allowed to leave the factory. Yang Chendong's face was serious when he mentioned this issue. He knew very well what would happen if the quality of the cement was not up to standard. Repeatedly wasting money was a small matter. If the building really collapsed, who knew how many people would die? The main garment factory. The factory manager, Zhou Hua, accompanied Yang Chendong as he inspected the workshops one by one. Yang Chendong, who had just inspected the underwear factory and the garment factory, had a satisfied expression on his face. The style of the garment can be more varied, and it must satisfy more people's tastes. Yes. Zhou Hua looked at her son-in-law with a satisfied expression. If it wasn't for Yang Chendong's arrival, her family would probably still be living a hard life. As they spoke, they arrived at the military uniform factory. Looking at the green, white, and blue military uniforms that were packaged, Yang Chendong exhaled and said, "The material of the military uniform must be of good quality, warm in winter and cool in summer. Especially the winter clothes, the cotton inside must be of the best quality. We can't let any soldiers catch a cold or get hurt because of the military uniform. 6th young master, please don't worry. All the clothes produced have to go through 3 inspection procedures. They don't know each other. We have also set up a reward system. Whoever finds a problem will be rewarded. If the problem is not found, they will be punished. This greatly increases their enthusiasm, so there won't be any problems." When speaking of this, Zhou Hua was full of confidence. These ideas were given by her son, Yuan Shaochen, and daughter, Yuan Xiaoyu. How could they be wrong? Okay. By the way, mother-in-law, if you have time, you should go to the palace to see Xiaoyu. She is now pregnant, so she is a little nervous. You should go and comfort her. After talking about official matters, the mother-in-law and son-in-law started chatting. Chapter 1365. Shipyard. Accompanied by the shipyard director Hong Yi, Qin Chuan inspected the newly produced warships. The 5-star Army Navy was currently using sailboats. Division-level warships were using Level 4 warships, regiment-level warships were using Level 3 warships, and so on and so forth. After years of hard work, they had finally built a Level 5 warship. The size of the ship and the number of cannons made it the warship used by the officers. We still need to build more warships like this. If there's any need, the other departments will fully cooperate and strive to upgrade all the warships. Looking at the ship that was over 100 meters long, Yang Chendong sighed. Yes, the Navy headquarters also has such a request. In the future, all division-level warships will be upgraded to Level 5 warships. In the future, we will focus on researching Level 6 and 7 warships. Hong Yi said with a face full of excitement. No, there's no need to worry about Level 6 and 7 warships. Right now, the research department is researching steam engines. Once that thing is built, it will be used on Level 6 warships. At that time, the speed will be dozens of times faster than now. Yang Chendong sighed and said. Paper factory. Factory director Kong and led Yang Chendong to inspect many workshops. Looking at the white paper being produced from the production line, Yang Chendong walked forward and took 2 pages. He found that the paper was very sturdy and thick. Very good. In the future, Yang Xie's children will have to go to school. This will require a lot of paper. You will have to work hard. Yes. Kong nodded. We will definitely work hard. After spring, we will build more production lines. There won't be any delays. There must be no delays. Education is the foundation of the country. Only when the people have culture and wisdom can the country become stronger. This is the national policy, and no one can change it, much less neglect it. Glass factory. A year's GDP and wealth had reached a certain ratio. It had become one of the important sources of Yang Xie's wealth. As the factory director, Qin Ming had his own pride. However, when he faced Yang Chendong, that bit of pride had long disappeared, because everything in front of him was created by this person. Glass was not a big deal in Yang Xie. It was even used in ordinary households. For example, the windows of many residential buildings were made of transparent glass. But to the Yang family, this was still a novelty, especially the various accessories made of glass. Businessmen from other places would rush to buy them. After creating so much production value and wealth, the head of the glass factory, Qin Ming, would be glowing with happiness wherever he went. The factory's confidentiality measures still need to be strengthened. We can't let others steal the results. If you need anything, you can go directly to Yang Wu. He will make the arrangements. Yang Chendong was very clear that the production of glass was not that complicated. It could be said that it was not difficult for those who knew how to do it. Once the process was known, he could make it, but others could also make it. That would be a big problem. Yes, 6th young master, don't worry. The people in our glass factory are all old. Their families are all in Qiqian City. They are also loyal to Yang Xie and will not be disloyal. Moreover, the military is also very strict in this area. Every one of them has a detailed record. Qin Ming also knew how serious the situation would be if something went wrong, so he immediately vowed. Good, I'm relieved when you do things. Yang Chendong patted Qin Ming's shoulder. This person was also an old man who had followed him for more than 10 years. All these years, there were no problems, which was enough to prove his confidence. Winery. Manager Hong Shi brought in different degrees of liquor for Yang Chendong to taste. He introduced them to Yang Chendong and introduced them to him. Wine was one of the things that men loved no matter where they were. As long as they could afford it, almost everyone would want to drink it. Therefore, as long as the quality of the liquor was good, there was no need to worry about selling it. Xianxia had opened up a large amount of grain fields. In addition to the appearance of potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, and other crops, the problem of food and clothing had been solved. Not only that, they were also constantly exporting their grain. Right now, the grain that the southern Ming dynasty needed was basically provided by the five-star army. When there was more grain, it was naturally not a good idea to store it in the granary. Using the excess grain to make wine was a better use. Good wine could be exchanged for silver and more money. Right now, the winery was also one of the main sources of income for Xianxia. Sixth young master, right now, not only do we have 10-degree liquor, 20-degree liquor, and even 55-degree liquor, we have also produced a lot of soft drinks and beverages. Together with the transparent glass bottles, the price will not be low. Hongshe reported at the same time as he reported his work. Your train of thought is correct. But it's not enough. For example, we can change the packaging of the beverages. Bag packaging and paper packaging can be used. This way, we can lower the content of the drinks and even normal people can buy them. This way, the sales will be better. Also, for the wine, we need to come up with more variations. Don't limit it to just a few types. We can divide it into high, medium, and low consumption levels. While serving the public, we can also earn more money. Yang Chendong thought about how the beverages in the future had already become a meal for normal families. Thus, he instilled his thoughts into Hongshe's ears. Manager Hongshe listened attentively, and the secretary beside him was also taking notes with a small notebook. After being in Crimson City for a long time, who didn't know that the sixth young master's words were the golden law? They were absolutely correct. Main food processing factory. Zhou Dai was accompanying Yang Chendong to inspect the food production line. Looking at the bags of instant noodles, ham sausages, and various canned food being packed separately, Yang Chendong also reached out and picked up a bag of instant noodles. After casually opening it and tasting it, he nodded. The taste is not bad. The quantity is also sufficient. Yes, these are all prepared for the army. The quantity is 30% more than what is usually sold. This is to let the soldiers eat until they are full. Zhou Dai stood on the side and said, just eating until they are full is not enough. You have to think of a way to eat well. The taste has to be varied. You have to consider the taste of the public as much as possible. Yang Chendong stood beside the production line and gave instructions. Air Force Training Ground. The original Eagle Division had been expanded many times. Although the current Air Force could not be compared to the Army and Navy, the number of people had reached tens of thousands. Coupled with their special mission, they had become a new powerful force that could not be ignored. The Navy commander Tian Yu had the rank of Major General. Wearing a sky blue uniform, he was accompanying Yang Chendong in watching the performance of the Navy soldiers. Dozens of hot air balloons rose into the air, carrying out the various orders given by the ground command. Time and space were sometimes low, sometimes left, sometimes right. After reaching the predetermined position, packs of high explosives fell from the sky, blowing up the original targets one after another. Individual paragliders rose into the air. Using the large oar behind them that rotated like a fan, one soldier after another rose into the air. They could follow orders to the west or to the west to complete the high-altitude reconnaissance mission. The development of the Air Force started from scratch, and it was not easy to reach the scale it had now. In this regard, Yang Chendong affirmed their work and also made a request. He also agreed to the request of Tian Yu to lead the soldiers to participate in actual combat. From now on, with the addition of the Air Force, any enemy's so-called ambush would have nowhere to hide. They would also become the unique overlord of the sky. Yang Family Academy. The first vice principal Wang Si accompanied Yang Chendong to walk around the entire academy. When Yang Chendong did not return to Qiqian City, Wang Si was actually the first leader of the academy. Under his leadership, the Yang family was constantly developing. It was different from the Great Ming Dynasty's knowledge, which was mainly based on the 8 classics, the 4 books, the 5 classics, and other sages. The studies in the Yang Family Academy were divided into different categories: Chinese, mathematics, geography, science, biology, physics, chemistry, agriculture, labor, and so on. The scholars of Yangxia had long been used to studying many subjects. This represented the comprehensive development of morality, aspiration, physical fitness, aesthetics, and labor. Only such a talent could have everything. Only learning Confucianism in the Yangxia had no future. So far, the Yang Family Academy had cultivated many talents for the Yangxia. Once the students graduated, those with excellent results would be quickly snatched up by various departments. Because of this, more and more young people liked to apply for the academy. With this repeated cycle, the academy had entered a very normal track. Now, the students of the Yang Family Academy had flooded the various departments, and they all considered themselves as Yang Chendong students, gradually forming a strong force. One could imagine that after a few years, when this group of people fully matured, they would become a powerful force. Perhaps even the future Huang Pu would not be able to compare. Not only do they have to study, but also have them participate in labor and experience the real life of the common people. Every graduate has to live in an ordinary village for at least a month. This is a hard and fast rule, there are no conditions. Many things can only be said if one truly understands it. If one only reads it from books, not only will it not be deep enough, it will also be easy to be separated from reality. Yang Chendong wanted students who knew what to do, not students who only knew how to talk but not do, or students who only knew how to do but not speak. Yes, this student will remember. Wang Si nodded heavily. Seeing that Wang Si was almost 30 years old, Yang Chendong suddenly stopped and thought of something. Has your grandfather already retired? Wang Si's grandfather was Baiming's Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, who held a high position and power. In the past, he was the person Wang Ji respected the most. He always thought that one day he could be as capable as his grandfather. But ever since he came into contact with Yang Shui, this thought slowly began to waver. Especially after coming to Crimson City, he no longer envied his grandfather. In his opinion, that position was a waste of life. It was just like a machine, going to work and getting off work every day. It was really meaningless. Chapter 1366. Unlike now, where he could come into contact with new knowledge and new things every day in the academy. Every time he figured out a problem, regardless of whether it was a teacher or a student, they would all jump up in excitement. A new window would be opened in front of him, and a new field of knowledge would be unlocked. To him, who thirsted for knowledge, this was the most satisfying thing. It was many times better than working in the yamen every day. Wang Si was very satisfied with his current life, but that did not mean that he did not love his grandfather, especially since this grandfather had been very good to him since he was young. Now that he heard Yang Chendong ask, he replied, "Yes, grandfather has already resigned, and has returned to his ancestral home to enjoy his old age." "And, then is it possible to bring him here?" "You should know that regardless of whether it is the climate or the conditions, this place is much better than the other side." This was the Minister of Personnel, and no one knew the officials of Baiming better than him. If such a person was brought to his side, if he could help him, the benefits would be a lot. Of course, Yang Chendong still respected this old man very much. As for the other party, he would not force him before he agreed. Hearing Yang Chendong's suggestion, Wang Si's eyes couldn't help but flicker, but he quickly calmed down. He knew his grandfather too well. If there was something he didn't want to do, no one could force him to do it. Since he didn't know his grandfather's thoughts, he didn't make any promises. Instead, he said honestly, "Teacher, I haven't discussed this matter with my grandfather, but I will write a letter soon to ask for his opinion." "Sure, if you have any difficulties, you can also look for City Lord Yu Qian and ask him to write a letter as well. After all, we were once colleagues, so we will definitely have more in common," Yang Chendong suggested with a smile, causing Wang Si to nod his head continuously. Following that, the bank, the art troupe, the bicycle factory, the tobacco factory, and so on all left behind Yang Chendong's footprints. With Yang Chendong's guidance, the various units became even more motivated. After receiving encouragement and advanced guidance, the various industries in Crimson City developed a vigorous attitude towards development. 2 months later, in the 3rd month of the year 1461, Yang Chendong personally brought all the officers above the rank of major to the largest square in the city. Here, a stone tablet that was tens of meters tall and a large hall that occupied an extremely large area was located. The monument was a monument to heroes, and the hall was a memorial hall for heroes. The ashes of all the heroes who died on the battlefield were placed here for future generations to pay their respects. It was precisely because these martyrs were not afraid to shed blood and sacrifice that the Yangxia party was able to grow stronger and the people were able to live a better life. Anyone with a conscience would never forget these heroes who had sacrificed themselves. On the first day of every month, a large number of officers would come to pay their respects. Even during normal times, there would be people taking turns to come every day. They would either burn paper money or offer flowers to express their gratitude. According to the plan, the navy would set off from the port and begin their journey of expansion. Yang Chendong brought all the officers here to let them receive a re-education of their thoughts. He wanted them to understand what their mission was, and to let them know that compared to the fact that they were still alive, it was already a very fortunate thing. In order for the people of Yangxia to live a better life, they needed to open up more land and territory. During this process, they had to display the spirit of not being afraid of hardships and not being afraid of death. If they were unfortunate enough to die in battle, their corpses would be transported back here to be worshipped by future generations forever. On the square, hundreds of thousands of people from all walks of life gathered here. They personally witnessed their leader, Yang Chendong, offer a wreath to the martyrs. Following that, all the officers above the rank of major swore, shouting slogans that they were not afraid of death, and made all sorts of promises to the martyrs. On that day, many of the people present cried. On that day, many of the officers present had their eyes wide open. On that day, Yang Chendong knelt in front of the monument and secretly swore in his heart that the martyrs would not die in vain. Yangxia would one day unify the world. At that time, even more people would come to pay respects to them. At that time, their heroic souls would be forever remembered by future generations. A day later, all the officers above the regiment level who stayed in Qiqian City gathered in the army headquarters auditorium. Yang Chendong personally taught them what the main contradiction was, what the secondary contradiction was, what the unity of thought was, what the united front was. How to build a base, how to fight a land revolution, how to mobilize the power of the people, how to do diplomatic and united front work well. 2 days later, under the personal escort of Yang Chendong, the Marines set off. Deputy Commander Gao Xiong personally led the team. Several naval divisions were ready to set off. Countless warships filled the military port, blowing their horns and raising their white sails as they set off with the wind. Yangxia's struggle for hegemony on the sea began. 2 days later, Yang Chendong was in the palace accompanying the princess, Hu Yan. A telegram that had just been received was personally delivered to him by Beta Persei. In December, Wan Xiaoyu was pregnant. In January, Xiao Yuxue and Dong Xiangxiang were pregnant. In February, Tuoya and Su Maner were pregnant. In March, Junko and Hu Yan were pregnant. Yang Chendong was like a hard-working little bee, constantly wandering around the harem, using his strength as a grand master to continuously sow seeds. Fortunately, the results were remarkable. Other than the second wife, Xiao Yin, who already had Lele, all the other wives were pregnant. Even Hu Yan, after having Yang Bo and being pregnant with her second child, was as happy as a little girl. Yang Chendong also took more time to accompany her. When the telegram appeared, Yang Chendong's expression did not change, but a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. If it was not an important situation, Beta Persei would not dare to send the telegram at this time. But he still came, which could only prove one thing. Something had happened. He reached out and took the telegram. After casually glancing at it, he put it aside as if nothing had happened. Next, he accompanied Hu Yan to watch the new song and dance arranged by the Arts and Crafts Regiment for a while. Seeing that the other party was tired, he asked Shao Qing and other personal maids to send the madam to rest. After Hu Yan's back was out of sight, Yang Chendong turned and went to the office in the hall. As soon as he entered the large study, Yang Chendong looked at Beta Persei, who followed closely behind him, and asked, "What's going on in the Far Eastern region?" "Young master, after receiving the telegram from Governor Chen Bo, I immediately asked the Security Bureau and the CIA. There was soon news from there. It should be that Tang Sheng, the commander of the 4th Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, suddenly rebelled and joined forces with the cavalry of a Siberian Mongolian tribe, Khan Hulahan, to attack the state capital of Archeng. After a bloody battle, Governor Chen Bo disappeared, and now the Far Eastern region is basically in the hands of Tang Sheng." Beta Persei obviously came prepared and reported after investigating the specific situation. "Khan of Siberia? Tang Sheng rebelled?" Yang Chendong muttered. After an unknown period of time, a cold voice suddenly sounded. "Humph. They are courting death." At this time, Yang Xie was so powerful that others were afraid that they would find trouble with him. How could there be people who were so blind as to find trouble with him? There was also that commander called Tang Sheng. He was in such a high position, yet he still rebelled. Yang Chendong really couldn't figure it out and was even angrier. However, there were some things that anger alone couldn't solve. What did Tiger's Mane say? Tiger's Mane's new army was in the beginning city, which was the closest to the Far Eastern region. If there was a problem there, they should have reacted immediately. Perhaps the army to quell the rebellion had already been sent out. This. Beta Persei lowered his head, his expression a little ugly. "What do you mean by this and that? I'm asking you, how many reinforcements are you going to send for the new army? Who will lead them?" Yang Chendong wished that he could give Beta Persei a kick. Why did it take so much effort to speak? Where did his usual straightforwardness and cleverness go? Beta Persei didn't dare to dodge Yang Chendong's kick, nor could he dodge it. He straightened his body and said, "Young master, regarding the matter of sending reinforcements, the officers of the new army have different opinions, so much so that Tiger's Mane can't force a decision." The so-called difference in opinions was still pleasant to hear. The truth was that everyone thought that the Far Eastern region was too poor and too far away, so there was no point in occupying it. Think about it, what did they get after occupying the Far Eastern region all these years? Other than the last time when the beginning city was in danger, Commander Chen Bo brought 4 cavalry divisions to help, he had always been asking for things. After careful calculation, with so much manpower, material resources, and financial resources, not to mention 1 army, even 3 armies could be built. The beginning city had begun to be self-sufficient through its own efforts. Neither Tiger's Mane nor Yumian wanted to continue to ask for help from Qiqian City. They wanted true economic independence. The fertile fields on the grasslands and the various small factories in the city were where their confidence came from. However, they still had to provide the Far Eastern region with goods, which greatly dragged them down, making it difficult for them to become economically self-sufficient. Now that there was a problem, wasn't this an opportunity to shift the blame? This was also the reason why they hadn't sent any reinforcements even though they had heard the news from the other side. Beta Persei's words were vague, but Yang Chendong was very clear in his heart. However, he didn't blame Tiger's Mane, Yu Mian, and the others for this matter. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame them for not having enough foresight and not knowing the benefits and importance of the Far Eastern region. Make the arrangements. After 3 days, we will set off. This trip to the Far Eastern region, since no one is willing to do it, this young master will go personally. Yang Chendong said with determination. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but the problem related to the Far Eastern region should also be solved. Not only that, but the problems of the Golden Horde and the Ross country should also be solved this time. Although he had given Chen Bo a lot of ideas, it seemed that the effect wasn't very good. As a mission in the future, he had been to the Far East region and knew the approximate location of some of the minerals there. Once the minerals were developed, the economic returns would definitely shock Tiger's Mane and the others. He wanted to use facts to tell some people that Yang Chendong's decisions had always been very correct. Chapter 1367. Yes. Beta Persei had long since had enough of staying in Resin City. Although his wife and children were in Resin City, he was only in his early 30s. It was not the time for him to retire yet. What he should do the most was to make meritorious contributions. Where would meritorious contributions come from? Staying in Resin City was just for experience. How could it be as strong as leaving this place and opening up new territories everywhere? Beta Persei excitedly went to make arrangements. Yang Chendong sat in the chair in the study room. After thinking about how many troops and supplies he needed to bring with him, he quickly got up. Since he was going to leave, he had to talk to the madam. Over the years, they had always been apart more than together. Speaking of which, he owed them too much. No, he had already thought about it. When everything was on the right track, he would take the madam to walk around and accompany them. In the bedroom of the madam, Princess Hu Yen, Yang Chendong dismissed everyone. Even Yang Bo went out to play with the maids, leaving only Yang Chendong and Hu Yen cuddling together. Hu Yen had just been found to be pregnant. It was the time for her to stay still and not move. At this moment, she was half lying in Yang Chendong's arms with a face full of happiness. "I'm sorry." After a long silence, Yang Chendong finally spoke. "Dong Shui, are you leaving again?" After just one sentence, Hu Yan's expression changed and her body trembled. But she quickly hid all her panic. Ever since she married Yang Chendong, she knew that her man was a man who could do great things. He must not be restrained by his love life. Towards Yang Chendong, the 8 madams each had their own way of addressing him. For example, the second Madam Qiao Yin was used to calling him young master, the 5th Madam Tuoyu was used to calling him war god, the 6th Madam Wan Xiaoyu liked to call him big brother, the 8th Madam Junko was willing to call him king, and the other madams called him husband. Hu Yen had always called him Dong Shui. The nickname Dong Shui was given to Yang Chendong when he first showed his talent in Baiming. At that time, he was famous for his talent and won Hu Yan's heart. "Yes, there are some things that have to be done. It's just that I'm really worried about leaving you guys behind." Yang Chendong didn't deny it. He was really worried. This time was different from the past. 7 out of the 8 madams were pregnant. How could a father be at ease? "Don't worry, everything in the palace has been handed over to Qiao Yin. With Tai Qingyi, the head of the palace's guards, there won't be any problems. Dong Shui, just do what you think you should do. This concubine will wait for your return in the palace." Although she was very reluctant, Hu Yen still spoke in such a magnanimous manner. This was the overall situation in the eyes of a woman. "All right." Yang Chendong clearly knew that Hu Yen was comforting him. He couldn't help but use a bit of strength in his hands and hug the other party tighter. Yang Chendong was about to leave. Before he left, he quietly stayed with the madams for a while. He also called Xiaoyin and Tai Qingyi over and instructed them to absolutely ensure the safety of the palace. He also called Yang Wu over in front of the two of them and left an order. Without special circumstances, no one was allowed to enter the palace and disturb the madams. He believed that Yang Wu would know what to do after receiving the order. It was just 3 days, and it passed very quickly. On the morning of the 4th day, the Navy's warship was already waiting at the harbor. Yu Qian, Ling Song, and the rest of the army's higher-ups came to send them off. "Mr. Yu, you have to take care of your body. Leave the small matters to the subordinates. You only need to decide on the big matters and grasp the direction." Yang Chendong held Yu Qian's hand and repeatedly reminded him. The reason why Yang Chendong was able to expand his territory outside was precisely because the headquarters had someone as big as Yu Qian to stabilize the situation. Otherwise, how could he be at ease at the front? "Yes, Your Majesty, please rest assured. This subject understands," Yu Qian said with an excited expression. This time, with Yang Chendong's return, the relationship between the two of them was clearly closer than before. Both of their political ideals gradually walked together, and there was no longer any gap between them. This could be seen from the way Yu Qian addressed Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong finally left and boarded the Navy's speedboat that had just entered service. From this boat out of Crimson City, it arrived at the port of Sea City in the 3 eastern provinces. Its speed was more than 2/3 faster than before. Beginning City. Tiger's Mane, Yu Mian, and Yang Si closed the door once again and discussed the problem of the Far Eastern region. Ever since the last telegram requesting for help, there had been no news from there for a long time. They could only receive some auxiliary and unimportant news from the Security Bureau and the CIA. Fortunately, there was no news about Governor Chen Bo's arrest. Presumably, there must be a problem with the radio station in Governor Chen's hands. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken so long to contact us. Now, it seems that we need to send someone to find him and restore contact. Yang Si was the first to speak. He was also the only one among the 3 who supported sending troops to the Far Eastern region. As a servant of the Yang family, the person Yang Si admired the most was Yang Chendong. In his eyes, as long as it was the young master's decision, it was the right thing to do. As long as it was the young master's decision, it was definitely the right thing to do. Since the young master was the one who decided to establish the Far Eastern region and invested so much, if something happened there, it must be saved and rebuilt. Saving people was a must. This was also what Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian wanted. However, if it wasn't to rebuild it, the two of them had some opinions. Seeing that Yang Si proposed to send people again, Tiger's Mane sighed and said, "We will definitely send people, but how many people to send and what kind of goal we want to achieve, we still need to discuss this matter properly." "That's right. It's not difficult to save Governor Chen, but if we want to establish a foothold there again, I'm afraid that we won't be able to do it with too few troops. However, considering the difficulty of transporting supplies, if we send too many troops, the logistical pressure will be great. It's really difficult." Yu Mian also spoke. He spoke from the perspective of a city lord and from an economic point of view. Tiger's Mane was the new army commander, so his focus was more on military matters. He was particular about using the least amount of troops to obtain the greatest benefits. Just from this point alone, there was no need to fight for the Far Eastern region. Yu Mian was the same. From an economic point of view, investment and income were not proportional, so there was no point in rebuilding the Far Eastern region. The two of them still had the same opinion as before, so Yang Si, who originally wanted to say something, could only shut his mouth. "Alright, since that's the case, I'll send a report to the young master and ask the young master to make a decision." Yang Si didn't have any intention of fighting for it. He didn't want this matter to affect his relationship with Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian. However, He believed that once this matter was reported to the young master, there would definitely be a result. At that time, with the young master's orders, who would dare to disobey? The telegram was sent out, but what was puzzling was that every telegram was like a stone sinking into the sea. There was no reply at all. After a few consecutive telegrams without any results, Tiger's Mane and the other two couldn't sit still anymore. Regardless of whether it was possible or not, they should at least send a telegram. What did they mean by not asking? Without a definite answer, Tiger's Mane and the other two couldn't help but feel flustered. Did this mean that the sixth young master was dissatisfied? We can't wait any longer. We have to confirm the number of troops to send out. Tiger's Mane once again called the three of them together and said this. It was almost April. The road leading to the far eastern region had already been opened, and the snow was dissipating every day. It was time to attack. How many people should we send? How much logistical support do we need? Can we win in a single battle? Should we bring Governor Chen and the others back, or rebuild the far eastern region? How much financial resources and population do we need? Commander Tiger, please give me an accurate number so that I can prepare. As soon as Tiger's Mane opened his mouth, Yumian's questions were thrown out one after another, causing him to choke and his expression to become more and more unsightly. Previously, Tiger's Mane and Yumian had the same opinion. However, now that he hadn't received Yang Chendong's order, Tiger's Mane was a little uncertain. He couldn't stand the pressure and wanted to make a move. Yumian was a little unhappy. He threw out these questions with the intention of letting the other party wake up. As the city governor of the first city and the leader of the local area, Yumian wasn't wrong to say this. He always had to estimate the gains and losses. He couldn't make a decision on a whim. If that was the case, once there was a loss, it might shake the foundation of the first city and ruin the good situation. Tiger's Mane stopped talking and looked at Yang Si for help. Yang Si turned a blind eye to this. He knew very well what kind of person Yumian was. Sometimes, he would even dare to argue with the young master over a problem. He didn't think that he could make Yumian retreat with just his face. That person has to be sent. Tiger's Mane, who didn't get a response, pulled a long face and looked at Yumian. When he spoke, he was already a little weak. We have to send someone. No matter what, the far eastern region is a part of Yangxia. The brothers there are our brothers. However, what I mean is that we just have to save the people. As for the far eastern region, it's better to give it up first. When our first city is completely strong in the future, we can think of a way to station troops there. Yumian finally said what he meant. Yangxia had indeed developed rapidly over the years. Countless new things had appeared and they had made a lot of money. However, at the same time, the military expenditure was also very large. Every time they occupied a new place, a lot of money and manpower would be invested in the construction there. For this reason, it wasn't that there weren't other voices. In fact, those who made this sound didn't even account for the number of people. Some people thought that Yangxia was already big enough. What they needed to do now was to stabilize everything. After the territory was consolidated, it wouldn't be too late to send troops to expand. It would just be a few years later. However, this method was stable and there wouldn't be any problems. Chapter 1368. However, this voice had always been suppressed by Yang Chendong. He did not care if others said that he was militaristic, nor did he care if others said that he was a murderous demon king. This was because no one in this world knew better than him how vast this world was and how many places there were that needed to be conquered. Yang Chendong single-handedly created Yangxia and established the 5-star army. If even his actions were questioned by his subordinates, one could imagine that if he could not conquer more territory in his lifetime, once he was no longer around and his successor was replaced, would he still have the courage and influence to unify the entire world and make the Han people the only ruler? Yang Qindong did not dare to think about it, he could only lower his head and do it. Fortunately, although the price to pay for occupation and expansion was not small, the businesses in Crimson City were diversified and the money they earned was enough to cover the expenses of the war. For example, provinces such as Vietnam and Laos, after being ruled for many years, had already reached a balance of income and expenditure. If they continued, they would be able to provide returns to Crimson City. Coupled with his powerful charisma and influence, no one dared to publicly criticize the expansion. Even he had to put in so much effort, so he did not dare to leave this matter to others. This was the reason why the primordial city had not sent out any reinforcements even though there was a problem in the far eastern region. After Yuan expressed his thoughts, Tiger's Mane could only nod his head in agreement after a moment of silence. Alright, then why don't we do as City Lord Yu says? Without a better suggestion, although Yuan's method was a little conservative, it was safe. Before Yang Qindong's telegram arrived, it would be better to do as he said. Yang Si did not say yes or no. He was like a mute the entire time, not saying a word. He also did not understand what the young master meant, but his intuition told him that the young master of the Far Eastern region would not give up. Otherwise, he would not have sacrificed so much over the years. Yang Si didn't say anything, so Tiger's Mane and Yuan made the decision. After some discussion, they decided to send the 101st Division out to assist the Far Eastern region. They wanted to find Governor Chen and bring him back. The 101st Division's commander was Lu Zhua. He was an extremely senior general. He was a calm and steady person, and it was more than appropriate for him to complete the rescue mission. They quickly came to a decision. The 101st Division was ordered to prepare for battle. 7 days later, the army would head north to the Far Eastern state. When an army set out on an expedition, it was necessary to deploy troops, allocate provisions, prepare equipment, clothing, and so on. It was a very tedious matter. Fortunately, the 101st Division was stationed near First City. Otherwise, they would need at least half a month to 20 days to complete the preparations. Time passed day by day, and with the city lord's manor and the logistics command headquarters doing their best to prepare, the various resources that were to be taken away were loaded onto carriages. Because the journey was rather long, and the roads were not easy to travel on, just the logistics alone had prepared a total of 1,000 carriages. It was said that this was only the first batch. There would be a second and third batch after that. The army set out. Along the way, the men and horses ate and chewed. Every day was a huge expenditure. Just from this point alone, Yuan's idea of retreating from the Far Eastern region was not considered a mistake. After preparing for a full 6 days, seeing that the army was about to set off tomorrow, Tiger's Mane called Commander Lu Zhua to his office. The two of them discussed the route of the march, how to protect themselves after entering the Far Eastern region, how to find Chen Bo and the others, and how to retreat safely. Just as the two of them were discussing enthusiastically, the office door was suddenly pushed open from the outside. Tiger's Mane, who was listening to Commander Lu Zhua's opinion, showed a displeased expression. Pushing the door open without permission was a sign of impoliteness. When he wanted to reprimand them, he could only suppress his dissatisfaction when he saw that it was Yang Si. Tiger's Mane still wanted to say something, but before he could speak, Yang Si spoke first. Tiger's Mane, Commander Lu, there's no need to discuss further. The young master is here. Huh? What? Hearing that there was no need to discuss further, Tiger's Mane was stunned. When he heard that the young master was here, his mind suddenly went blank. His first thought was that he had heard wrongly. Wasn't the 6th young master in the revered city? He had already heard that 7 out of the 8 madams were pregnant. It had to be said that the young master was indeed proficient in both literature and martial arts. He was actually so powerful in this aspect. Because of this, everyone thought that the young master should be in the palace of the revered city to accompany the madams. Who would have thought that he would suddenly appear in the origin city? That's right, the young master is here. Commander Qiu V of the Vanguard Black Cavalry has already entered the city. Let's go out and welcome him. When Yang Si said this, he was also somewhat in disbelief. However, when he saw Qiu V, all his disbelief disappeared. As the commander of the 1st Battalion of the Black Cavalry, wherever he appeared often meant that the young master would appear there. This was an indisputable fact. Hearing that even Qiu V had appeared, how could Tiger's Mane not believe it? He quickly put away the map of the Far Eastern region and walked out of the office while tidying up his military uniform. At the same time, his expression was very unpleasant. At this time, the young master had arrived in the origin city. This could only mean one thing. The young master was dissatisfied with their work. As the young master's most trusted person, he felt that his face had lost all light, and even felt a burning pain. With a gloomy face, Tiger's Mane did not care about discussing the war with Lu Zhua. At this moment, he strode out of the army headquarters and went straight to the east gate of the origin city with Yang Si. On the way, they met Yuan, who was also worried and had an unpleasant expression. However, this time, the three of them did not even want to exchange pleasantries. They just nodded to each other and strode forward. At the east gate, the travel-worn Yang Chendong appeared in the distance with the Black Cavalry. In order to rush for time, Yang Chendong and the others stopped their horses but did not stop. Along the way, they changed their horses countless times and finally arrived at the origin city in the shortest time possible. Compared to the last time he left, Yang Chendong's face was also full of displeasure. Obviously, Tiger's Mane, Yuan, and Yang Si's response to the problem of the Far Eastern region this time made him very dissatisfied. However, although he was dissatisfied, Yang Chendong did not intend to blame the three of them. After all, not everyone knew the importance of the Far Eastern region like he did. Even in the future, the Far Eastern region accounted for more than a quarter of the entire country. It was not an exaggeration to say that once it was occupied and stabilized, it would not be far from unifying the entire Russia. Of course, the current Russia could not even be called a country. It was still living a difficult life under the oppression of the descendants of the Mongolian cavalry. At the east gate, Tiger's Mane and the other higher-ups of the origin city stood there. As soon as they saw Yang Chendong appear on the white dragon, the people led by Tiger's Mane knelt on the ground with a plop and pleaded guilty. Let's talk about it after we enter the city. Yang Chendong only looked around before he rode on his horse. This time, he did not dismount from his horse and exchange greetings with everyone, which already showed his dissatisfaction. He could not blame these people, but it was necessary to give them some face. Otherwise, if he encountered such a thing in the future, he did not know what would happen. Tiger's Mane and the others followed behind Yang Chendong with a nervous heart and arrived at the palace courtyard of the origin city. When the high-ranking and middle-ranking people were rejected outside the palace and only Tiger's Mane and the other two were left, they once again knelt on the ground with a plop. Beta Persei had already found a chair for Yang Chendong to sit down and then stood aside. This time, Beta Persei was also very angry. The young master had requested the development of the Far Eastern region. He had also invested a lot of manpower and material resources and stationed an army there. When something happened there, the origin city was the closest. They should have sent reinforcements as soon as possible. Why did it take so long? No matter what reason they had, it was clear that they did not believe in the young master. Based on this point, Beta Persei had no intention of pleading for Tiger's Mane and the others. As the one who had followed Yang Chendong for the longest time, Beta Persei knew better than anyone else how powerful the sixth master was. Although his mind was also full of doubts about some things, it was undeniable that the young master's strength had completely conquered him. Even if the young master brought him and the two of them to rush into the Great Ming Palace, he would not be full of doubts like others. Instead, he would carry out his orders without blinking. Beta Persei's ability to execute and obey orders was something that Yang Chendong admired very much. Moreover, this person was also smart. He knew what could be said and what could not be asked. This was the main reason why Yang Chendong was willing to keep him by his side. Yang Chendong had no intention of letting the three of them get up. He sat there and listened to their reports. This was especially true for the northern Ming dynasty. When Yang Chendong left, he had already laid the foundation for everything. The defeat of Baiming's 400,000 troops had greatly damaged Baiming's arrogant momentum. In the end, they had to give in and sent Shiheng to discuss reconciliation with Yuan. 1 million Han people had been sent over, and Gao Yu and the others were also sent back to Baiming's imperial court. Naturally, it was impossible for the soldiers who had surrendered to be returned. With people and a sufficient population, many things would be easier to do. The land around the origin city was once again reclaimed in large amounts. A large number of potatoes and corn were planted. It could be imagined that the origin city would be self-sufficient in terms of food in the future. His Majesty personally reported the matter, but there was no joy on his face. All of this was arranged by Yang Chendong before he left. He was just carrying out his orders and did not deserve any credit. Yuan had just closed his mouth after reporting when Tiger's Mane, who could not wait any longer, had already opened his mouth. "Young master, I'm guilty. Please punish me." "About the Far East?" "Well, you don't have to worry about the problems in the Far East. The new army group will take good care of the origin city and be the logistics officers of the new army and the new 5 armies." Yang Chendong simply waved his hand. Chapter 1369. Young Master, our new. Knowing that Yang Chendong was displeased, Tiger's Mane still wanted to continue to fight for it. However, Yang Chendong spoke again. "This time, the young master will personally lead the troops, so you don't have to ask for instructions. By the way, this trip will use a lot of manpower. The required food and other things will be transported over from Red Nest City soon. Yes, everything will be handed over to the logistics command." As soon as he spoke, he only mentioned Yang Xi's name and even excluded Yuan. Immediately, Yuan's expression became very ugly. Yuan was not as simple as Yu Qian's son. If that was the case, Yang Chendong would not have given him such an important task. At most, he would have spent more money to find a comfortable position for him to stay. But he didn't. Instead, he placed such an important burden on him. Just this point alone was enough to prove his ability. However, having ability did not mean that he was completely open-minded. At least, when it came to dealing with the matters in the Far Eastern region, he did not do very well. His thinking was too conservative. In this matter, Yang Chendong could also see that a person like Yuan had no problem keeping his position, but when it came to pioneering, he was still lacking a lot. Since that was the case, he would just guard his home well. This could be considered as making the best use of people. Tiger's Mane and Yuan, the two people who opposed increasing the investment in the Far Eastern region, had stepped aside. Only Yang Xi, who had always advocated for greater support, was placed in an important position. This already showed Yang Chendong's attitude. By the way, this time, the new Second Army will also be transferred to the front line of the Far Eastern region. The 2 cities that they are guarding, Shaojing and Jingzhou, will belong to the new First Army's line of defense in the future. The 2 of you must guard them well. Yang Chendong seemed to have thought of something and added this sentence. After that, he turned around and left. They had not rested along the way, so they had to have a good sleep first. After Yang Chendong left, Yang Xi also had a lot of things to do and went to the logistics command to make arrangements. Only Tiger's Mane and Yuan were left behind. Needless to say, Tiger's Mane's performance this time had disappointed the young master. He regretted it 1,000 times. If he knew that the young master valued the Far Eastern region so much, he would not care whether the effort and the reward was proportional. He would have ordered the troops to send support long ago. Now, not only himself, even the new Second Army's army, this time, even the new Second Army was thrown to the side. This made him feel very uncomfortable. However, Yuan, he did not have to admit. After all, we mains, he's mains not, he's, unconvinced to the young masters, he, to the tiger, and to the main, he and main. The far eastern region is too far away from us, and it's too barren. The more support we send there, the greater the losses will be. I'll talk to the sixth young master about this matter now. I want to dissuade him. As he spoke, Yuan strode in the direction Yang Chendong left. Tiger's mane shuddered and followed closely. He also wanted to see if Yuan could persuade the young master. If that was the case, it would at least prove that their decision this time was not wrong. Yang Chendong had just returned to the palace of the first city to wash his face. Just as he was about to go to the bedroom to have a comfortable sleep, Beta Persei came to report that Yuan wanted to see him. No, the young master is tired. Yang Chendong waved his hand. Of course, he knew what Yuan was going to say. He really did not want to argue with him now. It was not scary for a person to make a mistake. What was scary was not realizing one's mistake at all. However, seeing that his father was Yu Qian, he did not have the intention to argue with him. Young master, you'd better meet him. Governor Yu is kneeling outside the door. He said that if you don't meet him, he will kneel there until he dies. Beta Persei scratched his head and said with a headache. This Yuan is really pedantic. After Yang Chendong heard this, he knew that he would not be able to sleep. He knew that the imperial censors of the great Ming dynasty were very powerful. Some of them were not even afraid of death in order to help the emperor. On the contrary, some people were proud of it. Even if the emperor ordered them to be killed, they were still excited that they could be written in the history books. Yang Chendong could not understand this at all. If this was not lunacy, then what was? However, he had not experienced it in all these years, so he thought that it was just a legend. Now, there was finally one. Sigh. After a sigh, Yang Chendong knew that he had to meet this person. Let him in. Yang Chendong had no choice but to tidy up his clothes and said helplessly. Young master, Tiger Man is also kneeling outside. Look. Beta Persei reminded carefully. Come in, come in. One was to raise, two was also to let go. Yang Chendong decided to meet them and see what they had to say. Beta Persei walked out after receiving the order. After a while, Yuan and Tiger Man walked into the hall. When they saw Yang Chendong, they knelt together. There's no need to kneel. If you have something to say, just stand up. Yang Chendong kindly dissuaded them. No, this time I must speak while kneeling. Yuan was like a stubborn donkey that would not turn back until it hit a wall. He raised his head and straightened his neck. Okay, okay. If you want to kneel, then kneel. Yang Chendong looked at Yuan, who looked like he would die if he did not kneel. He was too lazy to care. As long as the other party was happy, he could do whatever he wanted. Finally, he could kneel on the ground. Yuan looked quite happy. He first straightened his body and then said, King, it was my idea not to send troops to support the far eastern region. It has nothing to do with Commander Tiger. This subject believes that the far eastern province is too far away. Moreover, half of the year is cold. There is no future for development in such a cold place. It is not worth investing too much in that place. Now that you have decided on the grasslands, you said that there are many mines near the beginning city. Now, what we need to do is to stabilize the situation here, appease the people here, and open up grain fields and mines. We will win step by step. When we are strong enough, it will not be too late to think of a way to go north. King, it has always been a taboo for military personnel to go on an expedition. King, you can't put the army in danger because of your reputation. It is not worth it." As he spoke, Yuan knelt on the ground and kowtowed. With just a few kowtows, blood seeped out of his forehead. If not for Tiger's Mane, who was at the side, who reacted quickly, the consequences would have been even more serious. This scene opened Yang Chendong's eyes. In the past, he had seen in some history books that some upright officials had done all sorts of courting death in order to make the emperor accept them. However, that was only limited to written records. In this life, he had become Bugnam of Gojoseon, but none of his subordinates had done so. He had attributed everything to his own wisdom. Because he was wise, his subordinates would not oppose his ideas. But now, Yuan's actions had let him know that even if he thought that something was right, others would not necessarily think that way. He sighed in his heart. "Do you think that what is right must be right?" Of course, Yang Chendong would not say such words out loud. It would hurt the hearts of his subjects, and it was not something a ruler would do. What he wanted to do now was not to reprimand, but to reason. Using reason to convince the other party was using virtue to convince them. "Ahem, Yuan, you said that the Far Eastern Prefecture is a bitter and cold place. Then let me ask you, wasn't the beginning city a bitter and cold place in the past? When we first invested in building the city here, who would have thought that this place would have such a day? Since the beginning city can create miracles, why can't the Far Eastern Prefecture? It's different, it's different." Yuan raised his head and said rather firmly, "After all, the beginning city is only at the edge of the grassland. Whether it is by land or by water, it can be considered convenient. Moreover, this place has an extremely important military role. It is worth investing a little more here." Then who can say that the Far Eastern Prefecture has no important military geographical role? Who knows if the Far Eastern Prefecture will be as prosperous as the beginning city one day, or even surpass this place? Yang Chendong, who was familiar with the history of the future, knew very well that what he said was correct because the later generations had used their actions to prove all of this. Yuan did not know about this. He just thought that Yang Chendong did all of this for the sake of his reputation. In his opinion, Bugnam of Gojoseon already knew that investing so much manpower and material resources in the Far Eastern Prefecture was a losing deal. It was just that he cared about his reputation and could not admit it. Now, he still had to continue to invest more manpower and financial resources in the Far Eastern Prefecture. This was simply going further and further down the wrong path. As a person who was put in an important position and was also a person who had received kindness, Yuan had to stand up and speak properly. Although the king's reputation was important, he could not make mistakes again and again just because of his reputation and lose so many people and money. Although Yang Chendong's words were true, it was a pity that Yuan, who thought that he had seen through everything, did not think so. Seeing that Yang Chendong was still talking about how good the Far Eastern Prefecture was, Yuan's face showed disbelief. This scene was seen by Yang Chendong. He knew that Yuan did not believe his judgment of the Far Eastern Prefecture at all. Since that was the case, no matter how much he explained, it was useless. He could only use practical actions to slap his face. "Alright, since City Lord Yu does not believe it, why don't we make a bet?" "Bet? This subject does not gamble." Yuan shook his head and said with disdain. "Your mother." Yang Chendong almost cursed out. In the face of such a stubborn subject like Yuan, he really didn't know what to say. He was even more certain in his heart that he had to put on an act this time and succeed. Otherwise, with this victory, he was afraid that in the future, he would not only have Yuan under his command, but also Wang Mian and Li Mian. At that time, it would be even more difficult to do anything. This would also be a huge blow to his authority, which was something he absolutely did not want to see. "No, this time, you have to bet even if you don't want to bet. Within 3 years, if the Far Eastern Prefecture is not self-sufficient and cannot prove its important military geographical position, then it will be considered as this king's loss. In the future, if you have any suggestions, this king will listen carefully and can even give priority to your opinion. But if everything is proven after 3 years, then it will be your loss. At that time, when this king makes any decision, you cannot obstruct or interfere. How about it? Chapter 1370. Yuan's problem had to be solved. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. Think about it. This time, even Tiger's mane was persuaded by the other party. Yuan himself did not know what would happen next time. It was only a 3-year time limit. It could be said that Yang Chendong was going all out this time. At least, that was what Yuan thought. It was only 3 years. So what if Bugnam of Gojoseon caused trouble for 3 years? Once he failed, there would not be such a rash thing in the future. It was worth it no matter how one looked at it. As for whether the 6th young master would win or not, Yuan did not consider it. He was involved in every bit of the construction process of the first city. There was no need to mention how many difficulties there were. This was because the first city was not too far away from Liaodong and Baiming's capital, so he could get help for everything he needed. Of course, the Far Eastern region would also receive the support of Qiqian City. With Bugnam of Gojoseon around, perhaps they would receive more resources. However, so what? After all, it was too far away. Could it really be like the first city? At least, Yuan did not believe it. No matter how one looked at it, this matter was worth a gamble. In the end, Yuan raised his head. Okay, I'll bet. After Yuan agreed to the bet, he could no longer interfere with Yang Chendong's every move. He finally relaxed and the first thing he did was to sleep. No matter what he wanted to do, he had to have a good body first. This was a prerequisite. Just as Yang Chendong was about to fall asleep, news of his bet with Yuan had also spread. This was naturally Yuan's idea. He was afraid that Yang Chendong would go back on his word. He wanted to make this matter a reality. Yang Chendong did not know about this. Even if he knew, he would not care too much. Since he dared to say it, he was naturally confident that he could win. He slept all the way until night. When Yang Chendong woke up, he was full of energy. Beta Persei also took the opportunity to take a nap. When he saw that Yang Chendong had woken up, he carried a basin of water into the room. While his master was washing his face, he said, "Young master, Commander Tianhu, Commander Sherbei, and Commander Dai Qua are all here. All right, summon them into the palace to discuss matters." Yang Chendong put down the towel in his hand, a confident smile on his face. After obtaining Yang Chendong's permission, the world's #1 cavalry division completed the task of expanding the army in a few months. This was all thanks to Baiming's Liaodong cavalry. In the battle with them, they had captured more than 40,000 people. Most of them had been educated and became glorious soldiers in the world's #1 cavalry army. After the expansion, the world's #1 cavalry army's combat strength had also increased exponentially. With more than 40,000 soldiers, they would not be afraid even if they faced enemies several times their number. Needless to say, they were already humiliated by the fake surrender. They were eager to change themselves through a big battle. They naturally responded to Yang Chendong's summons this time. From the commander to the soldiers, they were all full of fighting spirit. Dai Qua was originally a member of the Far Eastern Army. This time, he was transferred by Yang Chendong. He wanted to take advantage of the other party's familiarity with the situation to enter the Far Eastern region. With the help of this division, they would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. When the three saw Yang Chendong in the main hall, they all excitedly saluted. Just from their appearance, they should have made sufficient preparations. Very good. Looking at your appearance, this king has an idea in his heart. Looking at the three, Yang Chendong also smiled. This was a confident smile. Presumably, you already know about the matter. Tang Xingyuan's change has caused the situation in the Far Eastern region to be unclear. It has also successfully provoked the anger of our 5-star army. This time, this king will personally go and let those who betrayed and dared to be our enemies know the consequences of angering our 5-star army. How about it? Do the three of you have the confidence to enter the Far Eastern region and show the might of our 5-star army? Yes. The three answered in unison. Their faces were filled with excitement before the big battle. Good. Let's discuss the matter of sending troops. While Yang Chendong was laughing, Beta Persei had already commanded several black cavalry to carry the map of the Far Eastern region. That night, everyone discussed until late into the night before dispersing. With the provisions prepared by the new army group for the 101st Division, Yang Chendong only rested in the first city for 2 days. Then, he personally led the 2,000 black cavalry, a regiment under Division Commander Dai Qua, and the 1st Division of the 1st Heaven Cavalry Army to the north as the vanguard. Bei would lead the other 4 divisions of the 1st Heaven Cavalry Army, the other 4 regiments under Dai Qua, and the new 2nd Army to wait for the arrival of the supplies from Resin City. This time, Yang Chendong obviously put in a lot of capital. It was said that there were dozens of large ships and 2,000 carriages of supplies transported from Resin City alone. Besides, Yang Chendong also went straight to the north after leaving the first city. He walked along the road that was previously used to transport supplies. The road from the first city to the Far Eastern region was indeed not short, but the road was not that difficult to walk. On the contrary, they had been repairing the road. They even put in a lot of effort to lay railway tracks for some distance, so the speed of the army's progress was not slow. They walked 250 miles on the first day. This was naturally related to the fact that the vanguard army was lightly armed. However, if they did not have the foundation that they had previously laid, they would not be able to reach this speed. Only 3 days later, the vanguard army led by Yang Chendong personally entered the Chita region. They could already see the shadow of Yablonov Mountain from afar. At this time, the Far Eastern region was like a natural unpolished jade. It had not been exploited or damaged. Looking from afar, the tall mountains and forests were covered in a layer of light green. It was the appearance of the beginning of spring. Due to the climate, the winter in the Far Eastern region came much later than in the Great Ming Dynasty. Along the way, some places where the sun did not shine could still see a small amount of snow. Just based on this, one could feel the helplessness of the bitter cold. In such a climate, it was no wonder that no one occupied such a large territory. However, all of this would change with the arrival of Yang Chendong. Dai Qua had already left with a regiment of soldiers. As the vanguard of the vanguard, he had to find Commander Chen Bo in the fastest way possible. Relatively speaking, the vanguard army led by Yang Chendong did not need to be in such a hurry. They only needed to follow the marks left by the other party. As the army entered the mountain range, the road became more and more difficult to travel. In the past, he had only read on the telegram that 2/3 of the supplies sent to support the Far Eastern region would be consumed on the way because of the road and distance. Yang Chendong did not believe it, but after personally making a trip, he had a deeper understanding of this. He also finally knew why Yu Mian would take such a big risk to stop him from supporting the Far Eastern region. Is the road difficult? Full of difficulties? Yang Chendong snorted. He liked challenges. If the mission was too easy to complete, it would lose its meaning. Just like in his previous life, sometimes in order to complete a task given by his superior, he could hide in a place without moving or eating for 36 hours. Compared to the hardships he had to endure back then, the hardships he was going through now were nothing. Send a telegram to Commander Shibi. Tell him to open up a path for the army. It shouldn't be too wide, but it should pass through the carriages first. If one wanted to be rich, one had to build a road first. This was a truth that could be used anywhere. The biggest obstacle preventing the development of the Far Eastern region was the transportation. If this problem could not be solved, then everything else was useless. After talking about the path, the vanguard army continued forward. After passing Yablonov Mountain, they saw the Stanov mountain range. After a few days, they saw the Arden River. At this point, the scouts in the vanguard finally sent news that they had seen signs of human habitation. Beside the Arden River, the water plants had already developed from light green to dark green. It was also close to the water source. This kind of place was often the favorite environment of herders. It was reasonable to see humans in this kind of place. There weren't many people on the other side, at most 100 or so. When Yang Qindong led the vanguard to the riverside, the originally busy herdsmen panicked. The screams of women, the cries of children, and some young men had already rushed out of the tents with daggers in their hands, standing together at the outermost circle. Herders had their own rules. Once they encountered an unknown situation, the young men in the tribe would habitually protect the elderly, women, and children in the middle. This way, they could better protect the tribe in battle. Under normal circumstances, even if these young men were all killed, the elderly, women, and children would not be in any danger. They would only become the slaves of another tribe. It was the same everywhere. If one wanted to survive, they would always need a large number of people. Sometimes, the result of leading two tribes directly to war was just to snatch the population. Sometimes, a woman would be snatched more than a dozen times from her youth to her old age, so much so that she would forget who the first leader of the tribe was. The sudden appearance of the 5-star army, each riding a tall horse and holding a sharp saber in their hands, caused the young men of this small tribe to show fear and powerlessness. When one side's strength was thousands of times stronger than the other side, there was no need to fight this war. This also caused them to feel despair. "Army, stop advancing!" Beta Persei shouted after receiving the order. As soon as his loud voice came out, the cavalry warriors of the 1st Division of the world's cavalry army all stopped. Chapter 1371. Army, set up camp here. It was still Beta Persei's loud voice that reverberated through the air. It was good to have Beta Persei. At least he didn't need to use a loudspeaker to pass down orders. The 5-star army cavalry stopped, and so did the black cavalry. Only Yang Qindong, Beta Persei, Tianhu, and Badao Jiang rode their horses towards the herdsman's tent that was surrounded. The reason why it was called a tent and not a yurt was because these herdsmen were not of Mongolian descent. They were authentic Russian people with white skin. Among the crowd, other than Yang Qindong, it was the first time the other three had seen authentic Caucasians. They couldn't help but look at them curiously. However, Yang Qindong's expression was calm. He rode to the outermost periphery and looked at the 20 or so young men and asked, "Hello, can you speak Chinese?" Of course, this sentence was spoken in Russian. In his previous life, although Yang Qindong entered the military very early and didn't have the opportunity to further his studies in university, he was very familiar with the languages and cultures of various countries. This was what people meant when they said that reading 10,000 books was not as good as walking 10,000 miles. "Yes, we can speak." One of the young men, who was more than 8 feet tall, looked at Yang Qindong with some vigilance and answered. "Very good." Yang Qindong didn't want to speak in bird language. It would be great if the other party could speak Chinese. He smiled and nodded. "Then I'll have to trouble you to take me to see your patriarch." "Don't worry, I have no ill intentions." As he said this, Yang Qindong deliberately spread out his hands to show that he didn't have any weapons. He looked harmless and friendly. In fact, Yang Qindong really didn't have any intention of doing anything to these people. Unless they were hostile forces, otherwise, Yang Qindong would treat everyone he met here as his quasi-citizens. He could become a member of Yang Xia at any time. How could he do something that would harm his own strength? Yang Chendong spoke politely, but the young man knew that he had no other choice. Seeing that the other party had over 10,000 cavalrymen, they didn't even need to lift a finger to deal with the 20 of them. All they needed to do was to spit at them. However, they didn't take action immediately. Instead, they wanted to settle the problem peacefully. This was already giving them a lot of face. Please. Knowing that he had no other choice, the young man nodded in the end. He then turned around and led Yang Chendong back to the tribe's tent. Yang Chendong's party still had 4 people, and they were moving forward at a moderate pace. Although there were only 4 of them, each of them was more powerful than the other. Even if there were 10 times more of them, they would not be afraid, not to mention that there were only 20 or so saber-wielding youngsters. It was only a tribe of about 100 people. Their territory was not large. After traveling for tens of meters, they arrived at a tent that seemed to be in good condition. Yang Chendong happily dismounted from his horse and looked at the unguarded tent. He asked, "Here?" "Yes." The young man just nodded and didn't make much of an introduction. Then he looked at Yang Chendong with his big eyes. Obviously, he was paying attention to his every move. Hee. Yang Chendong chuckled, thinking in his heart, is this a test of my courage? Does he need to get a group of executioners to throw cups as a signal? But I don't think a small tribe like this has such strength. Yang Chendong, who didn't want to be looked down upon, decided to enter the tent to take a look. Beta Persei wanted to rush in first to observe the environment, but he was stopped by him. The 5-star army suddenly appeared here, so it was impossible for the other party to set up an ambush. And even if there was, with his strength as a grandmaster, why would he be afraid? Under the slightly scrutinizing gaze of the white man, Yang Chendong casually lifted the curtain and walked in empty-handed. Just this boldness alone made the white man nod involuntarily. In his heart, his impression of Yang Chendong increased by a lot. He lifted the curtain and entered the tent. The first thing that caught his eye was a warm breath. With just a quick glance, Yang Chendong calculated that there were at least 30 people in the tent. Among them, women and children were the most, and the elderly were the least. Among them, the old man sitting in the middle of the tent stood out even more. Unlike the other people in the tent, when the other people's faces were filled with fear, the old man in the tent was calmly looking at Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong was also looking at the old man. He had a feeling that this old man must have a story. At least, he should have seen a lot of life and death situations. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so calm. Both sides were looking at each other, but no one spoke first. After about 10 breaths of time, Beta Persei finally couldn't help but shout outside the tent, "Young master, are you okay?" "I'm fine, go get some food and drink and send it in," Yang Chendong said without turning his head. Then he strode towards the old man and said with a smile on his face, "How should I address you, sir?" The old man had never seen such a calm and collected person entering the tent alone in his entire life. Unconsciously, he put away a short knife hidden in his sleeve and forced a smile on his face. "I'm Jurovsky, the chief of these people. How should I address you, sir?" Yang Chendong could indeed be called a distinguished guest. Just the golden robe on his body was not ordinary. It was dazzling. So it's the chief of a tribe. Sorry for the disrespect. My name is Yang Chendong, and the people on the grassland also call me Tian Khan. Yang Chendong chuckled and strode to the old man's side. Then, he casually sat down cross-legged. The moment the heavenly Khan's name was mentioned, the expressions of everyone in the tent changed. Then, all sorts of fear and dread filled their faces once again. The name Tian Khan was now only used on the Mongols. As the Russians who had been ruled by the Mongols for more than 200 years, they both hated and feared them. It was not an exaggeration to say that many times, the words, "Mongols are here," could stop babies from crying. Yang Chendong saw everyone's reaction, and he wanted to explain something. However, Before he could speak, the chief called Jurovsky spoke first. Don't panic, don't panic. He's different from ordinary Mongols. The chief said this in Russian, so Yang Chendong naturally heard it clearly. He couldn't help but ask curiously, why am I different from other Mongols? You can understand Russian? The old man was shocked at first, but he quickly calmed down. It was obvious that in this area, the Russians and Mongols interacted with each other, and there was no distinction between them. The language was also a little messy. Just like how the Russians could speak Chinese and Mongolian, why couldn't they speak Russian? After the old man's reprimand, the tent quietened down. The chief looked at Yang Chendong and asked, Tian Khan? Forgive this old man for being slow, but it seems that other than the noble Genghis Khan, no one else dares to use this name. That's right. Yang Chendong smiled and nodded. He did not expect the chieftain to be so knowledgeable. However, there was one thing he had to correct. I am not a Mongol. I am a Han Chinese. The title, Heavenly Khan, is a form of respect for me. You're not a Mongol? You're a Han. Jurovsky's face flashed with surprise for the first time. Then, he thought of something and asked, but what's the relationship between the Tian Khan and the Han people in the Far East? He didn't expect the old man to know about the Han people in the Far East. Yang Chendong was also interested. You know about them? That's right, we're together. When he heard Yang Chendong admit it, the chief's expression relaxed a little. He then said, I've been to the Far East before. I even moved stones there and helped build the city. I even received some wages. The Han people there are not bad. Wages? Not bad? Yang Chendong didn't understand this information. Since the old man had been to the Far East, why didn't he live there? This was much better than wandering around. With doubts in his heart, Yang Chendong asked, I didn't expect the chief to have helped there. But what's your impression of the place? Impression? The chief seemed to recall and said, it's not bad. At least they don't discriminate against us Russians. We're paid well. Although it's not as much as the Han people, it's still not bad. The city is very grand, but they don't allow us to live there. It's a pity. They don't allow you to live there? It was the first time Yang Chendong heard about this. He couldn't help but tremble. Yes, they don't allow us to live there. They say we're not Han people. When Jurovsky said this, his expression became a little gloomy. Hearing this, Yang Chendong smiled bitterly in his heart. He had told Chen Bo that those who weren't of his race would have different intentions. However, it didn't mean that other people were not allowed to live in the city except for the Han people. Just like the beginning city, not all of the people living there were Han people. Many of them were from various Mongolian tribes. Even foreign merchants who came from afar were allowed to live in the city. As long as they could prove their identity and were not hostile or dangerous, they had the right to live in the city. The only difference was that they had to pay a higher price than the Han people. Yang Chendong knew why the Far East hadn't developed in the past few years. It must be because the policy was wrong. Speaking of Chen Bo, his ability to lead an army and fight a war was not bad. However, he was better at persuading people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become one of the earliest political commissars in the Cold Front. It was a pity that he didn't have the experience of building a city, nor did he have the opportunity to learn. He just did it based on his own ideas. It was inevitable that he would take a lot of wrong paths. He also didn't know how to mobilize the people and how to rely on the people to build a base. Chapter 1372. Thinking of this, Yang Chendong was even more confident about the 3-year agreement. In the past, he couldn't find the root of the problem, but now, he knew where the mistake was. As long as he corrected it, the development of the Far Eastern Prefecture would improve. Perhaps in less than 3 years, everything would change, and the Yang faction would have another large base of operations. If he wanted to change, he had to start with himself. Thinking of this, Yang Chendong stood up. Seeing Jurovsky's confused look, Yang Chendong stood up and bowed to him. This bow frightened Jurovsky. He would never forget that the Heavenly Khan had 10,000 cavalrymen just outside the tent. Now that he was on the chopping block, how could he accept such a great bow? Jurovsky wanted to get up and move out of the way, but Yang Chendong had already turned around and bowed to everyone in the tent. His voice rang out, "What happened in the Far Eastern region was unfair to everyone. Since I, the Heavenly Khan, am here, I naturally have to change. Like this, if you want to settle down in the Far Eastern region in the future, you can come at any time. I swear in the name of the Heavenly Khan that when that time comes, as long as you are willing, you can live in the city. No one will chase you away." The so-called relying on the people to establish a base. It referred to uniting more people to fight against the enemy. Of course, it was not only the Hans who would unite, but also the local natives, the nearby Russians, and the Mongols who were willing to turn over a new leaf. In fact, uniting more people meant uniting more people who were willing to stop fighting, willing to work for peace, and willing to work for a better future. As long as they were willing, regardless of race, skin color, or region, they would unite together. Only then could the Far Eastern region gain the strongest influence in the shortest time possible and establish a firm foothold. As for the problem of those who were not of the same race, that would be treated differently in the future. It would be fine as long as they did not give the foreign races more power and status. This did not mean that all the foreign races were enemies. If that was the case, there would be no need to talk about unifying the world. Furthermore, without the foreign races as a foil, how could the Hans show off their noble status? It was like returning home in glory. He had to let more people know about it. Otherwise, it would lose its original meaning of traveling in the night. What? Upon seeing Yang Chendong's vow, Jurovsky's eyes widened as he stared at Yang Chendong in disbelief. In addition to shock, there was also doubt in his eyes. Yang Chendong looked like he was in his 30s, and because his martial realm had reached the Grandmaster realm, he looked even younger. Could such a young man really do what he said? Most importantly, he didn't have the final say. Yang Chendong seemed to have noticed the doubt in the other party's eyes. He chuckled and said, "Yes or no, the chief only needs to go to the Far Eastern Prefecture to take a look." Jerevs nodded. "That's right, whether it's real or fake, we'll know when the time comes." At this moment, the curtain of the tent opened from the outside, and Beta Persei, Ba Daojiang, and Tian who walked into the tent with a pile of food. As long as the conditions were met, Yang Chendong would never wrong himself. This time, not only did he bring military provisions like compressed biscuits, but he also brought instant noodles, ham sausages, various canned food, and cigarettes. As the three of them entered, all kinds of food were quickly piled up together. These beautifully packaged food were all things that Jurovsky and his people had never seen before. "Come, have a taste." Yang Chendong took a ham sausage with a smile on his face, tore it open, and chewed it in his mouth. There were also some canned food, and after opening it, the aroma overflowed. Soon, the sound of people swallowing their saliva could be heard in the tent. The elderly and women could still restrain themselves as much as possible, but the children couldn't. Originally, because of the heavy snow, they ran out of food a long time ago. They mainly relied on catching some small fish by the river and killing some sheep and horses. How could they have seen such a dazzling array of good food? "Eat as much as you want, this is originally for you." Yang Chendong couldn't help but chuckle when he saw the children's longing eyes and the adults' forceful control of their gazes. However, the children didn't move. Although some of them were already drooling, they still controlled themselves and only looked at Chief Jurovsky. "Let's eat," Jurovsky said after a slight hesitation. Although he didn't know why the Heavenly Khan was so good to him, since the food was already in front of him, it would be a waste if he didn't eat it. Even if there was danger, he could die with a full stomach, right? After receiving permission, the children rushed towards the pile of food until their hands could no longer carry anything else. Then, they hurriedly returned to their mother's side. What followed was the sound of wolfing down the food. At this moment, even people who didn't have an appetite would feel hungry after seeing the children's performance. With food as a bridge, Yang Chendong quickly became friends with Jurovsky and the others. After 2 crude cigars were lit and placed in their mouths, Jurovsky no longer had any guard against Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong smiled. The first step was to remove their guard, and the second step was to strengthen their relationship. The next step was to integrate everyone and become one of them. Yang Chendong naturally had his own way of doing this. Simply put, it was nothing more than bait. Humans die for wealth, and birds die for food. After a person filled their stomach, the next thing to consider was how to obtain more wealth so that they wouldn't starve anymore. Yang Chendong, who was very clear about the hearts of these herdsmen, used his trump card, silver. When Yang Chendong explained to Jurovsky that in the future, people other than the Han people would be allowed to live in the Far Eastern region, and not only that, as long as they acknowledged and returned to the Far Eastern region, they would be able to obtain an identity certificate, be allocated farmland, have a job, and have their own house. Jurovsky's eyes lit up when he heard this. Because of the geographical climate, the Far Eastern region was indeed vast and sparsely populated. However, this didn't mean that there were no people here. It was just that the place was too big and there were too many people, so it didn't attract much attention. However, if one were to count carefully, the population here would be at least a few 100,000, or even more. There were countless mountains, forests, and lakes here. There were wild beasts in the mountains and fresh fish in the lakes. These were all things that could fill one's stomach. Compared to the grassland, which only had green grass, it was many times better. Thus, this place had always been very attractive. The reason why people didn't come here was because the winter was too cold and there was no guarantee of safety. However, if they had a place like the Far Eastern region, they would have their own house. Winter wouldn't be so cold, and there would be more guarantee of safety. Thus, how could such a place not be attractive? After hearing Yang Chendong's words, Jurovsky nodded solemnly. Thank you, Khan Tian. Don't worry, I will do my best to tell this good news to the other tribes. Yang Chendong was in a good mood after persuading Jurovsky without much effort. Then, he casually asked if anything special had happened in this place recently. This was just a casual question. Yang Chendong didn't think that Jurovsky would know anything. After all, they still didn't know that there was a mutiny in the Far Eastern region. Naturally, they wouldn't know too much about the outside world. What was unexpected was that this was just a casual question, but he actually managed to get some information out of it. Jurovsky actually said something strange. Heavenly Khan, it's not far from here by the Amuga River. Our tribesmen accidentally saw a group of Mongolian cavalry stationed there. Mongol cavalry? When he heard this, Yang Chendong's eyes lit up. He immediately asked, how many people? A few hundred. You can ask Nikolaev for the specifics. He was the one who saw it. After saying this, Jurovsky said something to a woman beside him. The woman nodded and left. Not long after, Nikolaev walked into the tent. Nikolaev was the leader of the young people who blocked the 5-star army. However, when he saw Yang Chendong this time, there was no longer any hostility in his eyes. Instead, there was only gratitude. He was oppressed and ruled by the Mongols since he was born. He lived like an ordinary person. Nikolaev's biggest wish was to be able to eat a full meal. Later, he slowly grew up, but this small wish was never fulfilled. After marrying and having children with his wife, who was also of the lower class, he placed this wish on his son. He only hoped that one day, his son would be able to eat a full meal. Then, even if he died, he would be able to close his eyes. Today, this wish was finally fulfilled. Just now, he saw his only son eat a lot of food until he couldn't eat anymore. When he was about to vomit, he cried. Ever since he was young, no matter what difficulties he encountered, even if he didn't eat for a few days, he had never cried. He still used all his strength to fight against fate. However, when he saw his son eat a full meal and his stomach bulge, he finally couldn't control his tears. He felt that his life was worth it. His wish was fulfilled. It was all thanks to Yang Chendong. Now that his benefactor had something to ask him, he naturally didn't hide anything. He told Yang Chendong about how he saw a group of Mongol cavalry a few days ago when he wanted to make something for his son to eat. Chapter 1373. There are about 300 of them. Everyone is riding a horse and carrying a sword. They are like the Khan's soldiers. No. They are not as strong as the Khan's soldiers. Many of them look like they are emaciated and their clothes are old. As a poor man, Nikolaev was very attentive to details. After his description and Jurovsky's judgment, he finally determined that these people should be the Mongolian cavalry. Looking at their flags, they should belong to the Khan of Siberia's soldiers and should be in the reconnaissance category. This should be a group of Mongolian cavalry. Their mission was to be in charge of guarding the perimeter while keeping an eye on any suspicious targets. Once confirmed, they would call their friends and surround them. Phew! Yang Chendong let out a sigh of relief. With just this group of Mongolian cavalry, Yang Chendong could at least conclude that Chenbo and the others were fine. Otherwise, these cavalrymen under the Siberian Khan wouldn't be so careful and set the perimeter so far away. Are you willing to take us to find these Mongolian cavalry? Since he knew the whereabouts of the enemy, Yang Chendong naturally would not let it go so easily. His gaze fell on the young man Nikolaev and asked. Nikolaev's face was a little nervous, but his answer was still straightforward. Yes, I am willing to serve the Khan. He did not understand the 5-star army, nor did he understand Yang Chendong. Nikolaev did not know what the consequences would be if he refused. If he angered the Khan, he was afraid that a simple order would be enough to kill all of his people. Good. Come, take out some refined salt and sword for our friends. After Yang Chendong received a satisfactory answer, he laughed and waved his hand. Beta Persei turned around and left. Not long after, he brought the black cavalry to Chief Jurovsky with a few bags of well-packed refined salt and weapons. Refined salt, high-quality refined salt. Jurovsky unceremoniously opened the bag with the dagger in his hand. When he put his finger back into his mouth, he couldn't help but shout excitedly. In ancient times, salt and iron had always been the exclusive property of those in power. It was also one of the items that would not be exported or traded. And in remote places like the Far East, it was impossible to see them. Occasionally, some table salt would appear, but it was also coarse salt. Not only was its quality extremely poor, there were also many impurities in it. Good quality ones could be exchanged for several horses and sheep in one bag. Even so, it was not easy to get some. They were treated as treasures by the tribes. Yang Chendong had given him 4 bags, and each bag weighed at least 50 pounds. That was more than 200 pounds, and Jurovsky couldn't help but be excited. Jurovsky wasn't the only one who was excited. Nicholas and the others were also very excited. At this time, when they looked at Yang Chendong, there was a hint of trust in their eyes. With just this salt and iron, what was the point of selling their lives to the other party? It had to be said that in such a remote and bitter place, a human's life was the most worthless existence. Sometimes, for a mouthful of food, there would be people who would sell their dignity, strength, and life. Yang Chendong was willing to give out these things. In a sense, Nicholas' life already belonged to him. Without disturbing the celebration of this small tribe, Yang Chendong left the place. While ordering the army to rest, he also called Commander Tian Hu over and told him to prepare to send out a group of cavalry to follow Nicholas to the Amerga River and take down the hundreds of Mongol cavalry. Just treat it as interest, thinking about how the Far East province had suffered heavy losses from the surprise attack. A murderous intent flashed across Yang Chendong's eyes. It had always been him finding trouble with others. Since someone dared to provoke him, he definitely couldn't let them go. That night, this small Russian tribe didn't sleep at all. They surrounded the salt and iron just like that. Some of the young men also changed their rusty iron weapons under Jurovsky's orders and took out sharp cavalry swords. At this time, the things that Yang Chendong gave them were the hope of their tribe. They definitely couldn't lose them. Nicholas wasn't part of the people protecting the salt and iron. Not only him, but there were also 4 other people who didn't participate in the guard duty last night. Under Jurovsky's orders, they had a good night's rest. Today, they would follow the Heavenly Khan to deal with the Mongol cavalry. When Yang Chendong walked out of the tent in the morning, he was also full of energy. After reaching the Grandmaster realm, Yang Chendong could sleep peacefully in any environment as long as he wanted to. This was one of the main reasons why he was full of energy. Tian Hu had already brought 1,000 cavalry and was ready to set off at any time. This time, he was going to personally lead the army to kill the enemy, leaving behind Division Commander Teimu with a sad expression. Nicholas had breakfast with the soldiers of the 5-star army, and he saw a satisfied look on the faces of the 5 soldiers. To them, they had never eaten such a delicious breakfast in their lives, let alone enough to fill their stomachs. When Nicholas and the others looked at the 5-star army soldiers after breakfast, their eyes were filled with envy. Beside the Amu River, there were many military tents here, and from time to time, one could see men in Mongol clothing walking back and forth. Sometimes, they would even patrol around the river. Just as Yang Chendong expected, this was the Siberian Khan's cavalry unit. Their mission was to be in charge of the safety of this area, and at the same time, to see if there were any enemies from the Far East who escaped from here. However, their gazes were mostly on the inner side, and they did not pay much attention to the south of the Amu River. In their eyes, the enemy was in the north, not the south. As for whether or not someone would attack them from the south, it was not a problem for them to consider. There were 300 Mongol cavalry here. Although they were not elites, they were not something that anyone could target. For example, if Chieftain Jurovsky's 100-man tribe encountered them, they would probably run as far away as possible. If they wanted to face 300 Mongol cavalry who lived on horses all year round, they would need at least 1,000 cavalry to dare to take the risk. This was where Ahichi's confidence came from. As the general of the 300 cavalrymen, he had never thought that anyone would harm him. All he thought about was how to find the Far East army that had escaped and then strike at them to gain merit. As such, when Yang Chendong brought 500 black cavalry units to the south of the Amu River, Ahiki, who received the news, did not panic. Instead, he calmly walked out of the tent. When his subordinates reported that there was a cavalry unit in black armor outside the tent, Ahiki did not believe it and thought that it was an exaggeration. No matter if it was in Siberia or the Far East, iron was hard to find. If a normal person could get a good weapon, they would be proud of it for a long time. Who would be able to make armor out of iron? That was not a waste, but a luxury. Even the personal guards of Khan Hulahan only had leather armor on their upper bodies, which was already very enviable. With disbelief, Ahiki walked out of the tent. As expected, he saw a sea of black armor, and his eyes were filled with greed. Even though there were 500 cavalry, far more than the 300 he brought with him, there was no fear in his eyes. However, there was no trace of fear in Ahichi's eyes. Perhaps it was because he had not had an opponent for many years, but he was used to treating everyone as prey. Even if there were 500 Black Knight Dragon Guards, he still thought the same. He was already used to treating this area as his own backyard. Ahiki did not think that there was anyone he could not defeat. Even if there were more enemies than him, and their equipment was better than his, it was still the same. War is not about who has better equipment. Ahiki muttered to himself. He then raised his right hand above his head and shouted, "All troops, gather." The 300 Mongolian cavalry had already gotten on their horses. When they heard the general's order, they quickly gathered around Ahiki in groups of 10. It was said that small details revealed true ability. Just based on how quickly the Mongolian cavaliers gathered together, this was a group of well-trained cavaliers. This was especially so when there was a rare look of fearlessness in their eyes, and this was something that was rarely seen among the 5-star armies. Yang Qindong, who was riding on the white dragon, also laughed. He did not think that there was anything special about this Mongolian cavalry. He had seen many such opponents, and the strongest was the Walla cavalry led by Yes Hen. But what was the result? Didn't they still lose at his hands? They had once looked down on the 5-star army, but reality would give them a slap in the face. He also did not think that this Mongolian cavalry was that strong. Young master. Young heir, who had been following Wang Chong from the side, had an excited expression on his face. It was rare for him to encounter an opponent who did not run away. Although there were only 300 of them, they had successfully aroused Yang heir's fighting spirit. I'll give you 100 long way. Go. Yang Qindong said casually as if he was talking about something very normal. The black cavalry moved out. Under Beta Persei's lead and Badao Zhang's support, a group of 102 cavalry jumped over the Amerga River and headed straight for their target. Nicholas and the other 4 also wanted to urge their horses forward, but they were stopped by Cho Wu, who was standing at the side. This made the 5 of them puzzled. Did they not need to fight? After Yang Qindong took out a large amount of salt and iron to give to his tribe, Nicholas and the other 4 had already sold their lives to the 5-star army. They were even prepared to be members of the 5-star army. This was the rule. After receiving benefits from others, they naturally had to work for them. Chapter 1374. The 5 of them were even prepared to die in battle. However, when Qiu Vi stopped them, the 5 of them realized that the 5-star army was different from other armies. They did not need them to risk their lives. Could it be that they were really helping their tribe for free? The other 4 people were led by Nikoliv. After being stopped, their gazes naturally fell on him. Let's wait and see. Nikoliv, who was also at a loss, could only say this. At the same time, he looked at the battlefield. He could not understand why the 5-star army only sent out 100 cavalry even though they had more people. What was the reason for this? Very quickly, Nikoliv had an answer. Everything that happened on the battlefield told him that there was only one reason why the 5-star army only sent out 100 cavalry. These Mongol cavalry were not worth sending out more cavalry. The black cavalry leaped over the river and the distance between the two sides was getting closer and closer. When they were less than 4 li away, Ahuchi shouted, 100 cavalry on each side, charge. Ahuchi thought that he had seen through the situation and that the enemy had sent out 100 cavalry to test the waters. This was his chance. He only needed to kill these 100 cavalry as quickly as possible and take advantage of the fact that the enemy had not reacted to the situation to kill them. Then, the situation would be settled. When he thought about how the enemy's black armor would increase his army's combat strength by at least 50%, he began to laugh maniacally. It was truly a blessing from the gods that such a good preparation was placed in front of him. There was no reason for him not to accept it. On the battlefield, the 200 Mongol cavalry shouted and made all sorts of noises. They spread out and surrounded the 100 black cavalry. Although there were only 200 of them, because their formation was too spread out, it actually gave off a strong momentum. They either went towards the left wing or the right wing. Some even went towards the middle. The sabers in their hands continuously spun as they prepared to strike. On the other hand, the 100 black cavalry soldiers also spread out. With Beta Persei, Ba Dao Jiang, Peng Yu, and the others at the tip of the arrows, they formed groups of around a dozen people, and they tore through the air like arrows that left their bows. They headed straight for Ahechi, who was protected by 100 Mongolian cavaliers. It was as if no matter where the wind blew, he would just go all the way. Fire! Fire! Ahechi's face revealed a trace of panic when he saw that the incoming enemy did not care about being surrounded and instead went straight for the root of the problem. Although there were only 100 of them, for some reason, they gave him a great sense of pressure. It was like being stared at by a wild beast on a grassland. With a command, the 100 cavalrymen beside him quickly took out their strong bows, knocked their arrows, and began to shoot. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, arrows pierced through the air unceasingly, their target being the 100 black cavalry soldiers who were charging straight at them. At the same time, a large number of Mongolian cavaliers also surged in from the left and right of the black cavalry. It was not an exaggeration to say that there was an ambush from all sides. At that moment, the black cavalry had already met with dozens of Mongolian cavaliers in front of them. Their black clothes and black armor allowed them to ignore normal arrows. At that moment, they only needed to swing their swords and kill the enemies who were charging at them. Clang clang clang, the Black Knight Dragon Guards did not show any signs of slowing down, nor did they make any movements to dodge. They allowed the arrows to hit their bodies, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Then, the sabers in their hands clashed with the sabers of the Mongolian cavalry in front of them. Then, an unbelievable scene appeared. The Mongolian cavaliers who were riding on their horses with ferocious expressions were stunned on the spot. It was as if their acupoints had been sealed. They did not move at all and allowed the black cavalry soldiers beside them to jump past them as if they did not know what was going on. This scene shocked Nikolaev, who was watching the battle. This scene shocked Ahechi, who was commanding the battle. This scene shocked the Mongolian cavaliers who were flanking them from the left and right. A scene that should not have happened on the battlefield happened just like that. But everyone knew that swords and sabers had no eyes on the battlefield. Often, the outcome of a battle could be decided in an instant. There was absolutely no room for the slightest bit of absent-mindedness or carelessness because it often meant that one was already walking together with the god of death. But now, it was not just one Mongolian cavalier, but dozens of Mongolian cavaliers who were standing there. It was as if a spell had been cast on them and they did not move at all. This scene was so real that it caused everyone who saw it to have a big question in their hearts. They could not help but ask in their hearts, what is going on? What is going on now? While most people were still confused, Beta Persei led the black cavalry and did not stop charging forward. They continued to charge forward bravely and soon, they reached Ahechi's camp and stood in front of the Mongolian general. Kill! Ahechi was also puzzled as to why his cavaliers did not move. However, with the enemy before them, he could not care so much. He clamped his legs on his horse and rode forward with his saber raised. Dang, dang, dang. When the two sides came into contact, they exchanged 3 saber blows in an extremely short period of time. Only the most elite cavaliers could achieve such a speed. Only the veterans who were one with their horses could do it so skillfully. The black cavalry slashed 3 times in a short period of time. Ahechi and the others who were passively defending also blocked 3 saber blows. A huge force traveled down the saber to their arms, causing the arms of the 100 Mongolian cavaliers to tremble uncontrollably. Shock rose in their hearts. Not only was the speed of their opponent's saber extremely fast, the strength was also extraordinary. He was definitely a tough opponent. Before the shock in their hearts could completely disappear, an even more shocking scene appeared. After blocking the 3 slashes, they were shocked to find that the sabers in their hands had actually broken into two. This sudden scene shocked everyone, causing them to be at a loss for what to do. They were completely shocked, just like the dozens of Mongolian riders earlier. Their minds were blank as they sat on their horses, forgetting everything. How could they have known that the Black Cavalry Dragon Guards had already changed their weapons to divine sabers? This was something that Yang Chendong had specially brought out from the military factory in Crimson City. As Yang Xie gained more and more iron ore, his forging skills continued to improve. The quality of the sabers also increased greatly. Every new divine saber lived up to its name. Not only were the sabers thinner and lighter than normal sabers, they were also sharper and had reached a state where they could cut through iron like mud. In just 3 saber blows, they were able to cut the enemy's saber in half. This showed how powerful and tough the saber was. Get down from your horses. Beta Persei and the others, who had succeeded in one strike, reined in their horses. Then, they swung their arms and used the backs of their sabers to smack down on the backs of the Mongolian cavaliers who were still standing on their horses with shocked expressions. Under the powerful force, the Mongolian cavaliers who were unable to defend themselves in time fell down from their horses like dumplings. 100 Mongolian cavaliers, including a Hechi, were all captured at the start of the fight. This sudden scene also shocked the Mongolian cavaliers who were charging over from both sides. In their eyes, a Hechi and the others were captured the moment they came into contact with the Black Cavalry. How did this trick work? They really could not understand it. It was only when the dozens of Mongolian cavaliers who were fighting against the Black Knights and Dragon Guards on the battlefield suddenly shouted and ran in all directions with their broken sabers in hand that the other Mongolian cavaliers noticed that the weapons in their comrades' hands had been broken into two at some point in time. They finally figured out what had happened and why their general had been taken captive in a single encounter. The remaining 100 or so Mongolian cavaliers suddenly changed their direction of charge. They no longer fought against the Black Cavalry. Instead, they ran in all directions. A group of cavaliers dressed in black armor and equipped with spirit. They could ignore the arrows fired from afar and also had sabers that could cut through iron like mud. This kind of opponent was not someone they could fight against. Since they could not win, they could only run. They had to report this news to the Khan. Not good, they want to run. Nikolaev instinctively shouted and immediately rode out. The scene that had just happened in front of him had stimulated him greatly. In their eyes, they were invincible and there was nothing they could not win. Wherever they appeared, it was as if a gust of wind had swept through and not a single blade of grass grew. Once any of the Russian tribes met them, they would usually run away before the battle even started. Yet, it was precisely such a powerful existence that was unable to withstand a single blow from the Black Knight Dragon Guards. In just a single exchange, the Black Knight Dragon Guards were defeated. This was simply too unbelievable and unbelievable. After the shock, Nikolaev's eyes were filled with killing intent. The Mongolian cavaliers were defeated. Was this not the time for him to collect the blood debt? He thought about how his tribe originally had more than 1,000 people, but after being attacked by the Mongolian cavaliers time and time again, there were only a few hundred people left. How great was this hatred? Even in his dreams, he wanted to take revenge. He could only hate the fact that his strength was limited. Now that the opportunity had finally appeared, how could he let go of this chance to beat the dog in the water? Nikolaev wanted to chase after the enemy, and the 4 companions beside him did the same. However, before they could truly run out, arrows tore through the air and landed on the Mongolian cavalrymen who were trying to escape one after another or on their warhorses. Tian who appeared with 1,000 cavaliers. They had been lying in ambush for a long time in order to surround the enemy and not give anyone a chance to escape. You're tuning in to the UnparalleledSwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.